Presiding Councillor, I don't believe this motion should be allowed under standing orders because it does not directly affect either the District of Belfast or the citizens that live within it. I am not aware of any hunting of dogs that occurs in this city legally. Any hunting of dogs would be of badger baiting and is already outlawed. Therefore, I don't think this motion should be discussed tonight under the current standing orders.
Control has been competent.
Okay, I can take on board your points, Councillor Craig, but there is discretion as myself as the Chair, and I know there have been other issues that have been heard in this chamber by other members and other parties, and that has been allowed. So on this occasion I'm going to allow Councillor Long to put forward the notice of motion.
Does that mean, Presiding Councillor, that standing orders are now suspended?
No, I have the power as the Chair of the Shadow Council, and I am making that decision that I allow Councillor Long to move his motion.
Thank you.
Please point me to the actual point in standing orders where you have that power, just for my own interest in learning.
My decision is final, and there's nothing within the standing orders that precludes this notice of motion to be discussed. Councillor Long, please move your...
Thank you. And we're going to celebrate International Women's Day at the weekend. I'd just like to wish you all a happy World Wildlife Day today, and particularly Councillor Craig. I did ask for this to be checked, and certainly I will come to the reason why I think it's particularly relevant to Belfast to do that, but I will do that. There is one slight clarification, one change to the motion, which I would like to make, and that would be to remove the words calls upon take out Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development and replace that with Northern Ireland Executive. I felt we mentioned the Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development last month, so I thought maybe we didn't want to peck on her too much, to be honest with you, so I'm sure she's more than capable of dealing with it. I think the other issue is, and more seriously, is that there is a cross-cutting theme to this, and therefore a number of departments may need to take on board some of the matters. I think it's 10 years ago this past month that the ban on the hunting of mammals with dogs was introduced in Great Britain, and I think very many of us will see that it's very embarrassing that Northern Ireland is the only region in which this barbaric practice continues at this time. The reason why I am bringing it here is, first of all, I think there's been a very clear citywide concerns about animal welfare issues. I know last year I had the privilege of attending a rally outside here when we were asking about the implementation and enforcement of animal cruelty legislation, and indeed a number of councillors like Councillor Core and the other Councillor Core Johnston spoke very well in terms of really, showing the passion that people feel in this city for animals, and I therefore hope this is a cross-party kind of matter that we can work together on. I also recently attended a meeting in East Belfast which dealt with a number of animal cruelty issues, and this particular matter of hunting and indeed the banning of snares was part of that, and very many people raised that issue at the time. It's also part of the League Against Cruel Sports strategy for 2015, and I think it's important that we highlight that issue. Belfast City Council has a proud record of leading in terms of animal welfare issues, and particularly we've had the first council, I think, to ban wild animals in circuses on our council property, and that was done by Belfast, and I think it's good that we show a lead here in Belfast City Council. As the largest council in Northern Ireland, I also think we can send, and hope we can send, a united message that we want this Northern Ireland Assembly to look at this particular matter and address the issues that come out of it. The positive thing that came out of the rally last year was that we did actually see, and we have seen, improvements in terms of the enforcement of the legislation since that time, and I hope that by highlighting this issue tonight we can help move this on. I think very many of us would have expected that immediately after the implementation in GB that it might have taken some time, but a decade is a long time for no implementation to be done. I raised this matter in Castlereagh, and indeed it was cross-party support back in 2004 in terms of we wanted to see a ban on fox hunting at that time, and I know there have been attempts by Brian Wilson to raise the matter as a private member's bill in Stormont, but that was unfortunately sidelined. And as indeed we have been asking, why has nothing been done? We have contacted the Minister for Agriculture and Rural Development, who says it's a cross-cutting matter, and we've also contacted OFM, DFM, who have said that because it's not in the programme for government, they have no plans to introduce that measure. I personally don't think that's a very good excuse. I think what we need to see is proactive measures, and there's been lots of things that aren't necessarily in the programme for government that can be and have been implemented since then. I think sometimes some of us will particularly look at the amount of some of the trivial issues that are discussed up at Stormont and wonder why this particularly important issue could not have been addressed. The other thing is that a recent Ipsos poll showed that 80% of people support this ban. This is what the public want, and in terms particularly of stag hunting, 86% of people want to see this moved on. So why am I opposed to hunting of mammals with dogs? Well, first of all, I think in terms of having a sport or an entertainment where an animal can and is often ripped apart is totally and utterly acceptable. We've seen chaos that happens in terms of farms, quite often animals being killed and attacked, and I think very few of us who have actually watched the videos of the stag that was attacked by dogs in County Down a number of years ago can think of anything that is positive or good about that. It's absolutely disgusting. People say, oh well, we have to protect countryside traditions. Well, there's absolutely no reason why people can't be involved in drag hunting if they want to do that. That means that the mechanisms are preserved, but it doesn't mean that an animal has to be killed. And in terms of estate management, we're told, well, you have to get rid of foxes because they're vermin and that they're not doing anything good. Well, the reality is that in terms of an environmental and estate management issue, it's not particularly effective. I haven't seen any of our environmental health officers mounting horses, wearing red jackets and blowing trumpets as they go around to deal with rats and various other vermin, and so I believe that it really is ineffective. There's been shown to be much more effective ways in terms of dealing with fencing or with dealing with shooting than actually having to do this. I think, as well as that, we can see that before the ban was brought in the rest of the UK, what happened was that there were actually more foxes killed by cars than there were in fox hunts, so it didn't show that it was a particularly effective way of culling or reducing the numbers of foxes, although 20,000 were killed at that time. And I think the other issue is that in terms of animal welfare, I think there's emerging evidence that the legal practice of fox hunting is sometimes being used for illegal activities as a cover for that, for things like badger baiting and dog fighting, where we're seeing animals being hardened, and that's been used as an excuse far too often, and they use the cover of legal activities, which is very unfortunate. In terms of snares, I'll just very recently or briefly mention that. There is a consultation ongoing in that matter, and I think it's appropriate that we do have a view from that point of view, so I think we usually are asked for our statutory views in terms of that particular matter. And I think that the current so-called self-regulation doesn't really work. It's really barbaric, and it's also indiscriminate, because what we're actually seeing is quite often not only the prey that people are chasing after or looking to kill actually being killed, but we're seeing other animals being killed as well. I just read of one particularly disgusting example where a 7-year-old dog was caught up in a snare in a hedge and ended up losing its leg, and you know, it's absolutely disgraceful and ridiculous. I think it's important that all the relevant departments bring forward proposals and indeed legislation to tackle this matter, and tonight I'm just really bringing forward this motion as an opportunity to highlight this issue, and I hope that that all the parties here can unite together in supporting it, to make a firm call for the Executive to stop Northern Ireland being a legislative backwater in terms of animal welfare matters like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just before we look at the seconder, there's a slight amendment that's just to make sure that the Council is happy to accept that, and it's changing just the DARD Minister with the NI Executive. Is that agreed first? Yep. Okay, a seconder, Councillor Stalford.
Thank you, Presiding Councillor. I support the content of this motion, although I do question the way in which the Council has been asked by the proposer to vote for it, because I thought it was interesting that the reference was made to the DARD Minister and reference was made to OFM DFM. No reference was made to the Minister for Justice, who has a primary responsibility for improving the awareness and understanding of the judiciary around issues pertaining to animal welfare. And on that basis, it was extremely disappointing to hear the Minister for Justice confirm that DOJ has no plans to train the judiciary on issues pertaining to animal welfare. Such is the commitment of that particular department. So I do think it's a bit cynical, and I suspect it's because we're in the teeth of an election to bring motions like this in front of a council and to present them in that way. Nevertheless, in relation to the actual content of the motion, I'm happy to support both issues relating to hunting and in relation to the use of snares. I am a convert on this issue. I previously would have been opposed to the hunting ban when it first came in, because I thought that it made criminals out of thousands of law-abiding people. However, there was an incident probably about 4 or 5 years ago where a hunt tearing across people's land came into the garden, and there was a wee boy and a wee girl, brother and sister, playing with their new puppy, and the dogs ripped their new puppy to bits. The children were traumatised. Their experience was made worse by what I can only call a braying hooray Henry on a horse coming into their garden. And the children went up to him and said, "Is our dog dead?" And he picked up a bit of the dog, said, "It looks like it," and threw it over the hedge. No society can justify practices that lead to incidents like that. Hunting with hounds has no place in any civilised order. And I firmly believe, from a position where I didn't believe it, I firmly believe that this practice should be consigned to the ash heap of history where it belongs. I am not persuaded by the arguments that have been made, that have been mentioned. I am not persuaded by the arguments that have been made about this representing an effective form of pest control. I have family who farm. If people have difficulties in terms of sheep or chickens with foxes, there are other ways of dealing with those difficulties. You do not assemble a group of people, put them on horseback, and turn a day's sport into a form of pest control. I do not accept that argument. I don't think it's based on any fact, and I don't think it's been shown in any way that hunting brings benefit to rural communities either. And this is one of the arguments that I find very insidious by those who argue in favour of hunting, to try and pit it as a town versus country issue. That is not the case. In many cases, hunts tear across people's land, destroying fences and trampling crops and causing all sorts of damage without the permission of the owners of that land. We are a democracy. The people, I believe, are firmly of the view that this practice should be done away with once and for all. And I accept, and this is an important point, I accept that differing parts of the United Kingdom can have differing bodies of law, but I do believe that on this issue it is important that we do extend the ban that was introduced over 10 years ago. This practice has no place anymore in our society, and I doubt there will be any person in this chamber will have the gumption to rise to their feet and try and justify its continued existence. This foul practice should be done away with forever.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stephen Core.
Thank you. Again, I raise to support the motion, and I'm glad that Councillor Long put in that, that as an executive decision, and the executive needs to be held to account for it, as not just one department. And I did, along with Julianne, we did speak last year at the event at the front of City Hall. And what was clear to me when we brought them in here to organise the event, the event was organised in the event of, in the aftermath of a judgment in a case around animal cruelty in East Belfast, where people who were convicted of animal cruelty, severe animal cruelty, walk free from the courts. And what I got that day out there, and I'm sure Julianne's got the same, this is a powerful lobby. It's a very growing lobby, it's a very organised lobby around the cessation of animal cruelty in this part of the world, and all the different forms it takes. I agree that some of the stuff here around the fox hunting, I'm totally in support of what's been said to date, but it does go much further than that. And I think this council indeed does have to take a lead, and does have to show a lead, and does have to stand up to the plate, stand up and take a leading role in trying to make animal cruelty in all its different forms. To attack that, to make it bring an end to that, rather than just one specific thing. But I know that's not that the point is around one specific, but it's about more than that for us. It's about getting in place policy. I know the DUP, for example, had a policy document on, and I think the PUP had one as well. We would hope to do something similar as well. So again, without elongating the meeting any longer, fully supportive of it, and we just hope it's a start of things.
The member take 1 point. Yes, 1 point. I'm grateful to the member. I think one of the things that we proposed in our policy document, I think it would really help when people are banned from owning or from keeping animals. There's no way at present of policing such a ban. I think we should have a banned owners register that would be made available to council officers, that we would then know who is banned from owning pets, why they've been banned from doing it, and we would then be able to enforce such bans. Because at present time, we hear on news, such and such a person was banned from owning animals for a period of 8 years. We don't know how it's policed or enforced at the minute.
A very fair point, and again something which we should be fully supportive of. So it's just in conclusion, fully supportive of the motion, and we do recognise that the people who are lobbying us are organised, and they're really decent people who are just there for the welfare and the rights of animals. And as a council and as elected members for the city, we should be doing everything in our power to support that. Thank you.
Councillor Julianne Core
Johnson. Not to be anal. I'm going to be quite quick and blunt, but Northern Ireland has seen an alarming rise in cases of neglect, torture and violence towards animals, and that includes the barbaric act of hunting. And I'm going to spare the Chamber any graphic details of the countless examples that I've explored leading up to our party conference in October 2014. And thankfully at that conference, the Progressive Unionist Party enshrined into policy the reformation of animal welfare in Northern Ireland. And so subsequently we'll be supporting this motion. And just adding to the comments from Councillor Stolford there, the Progressive Unionist Party also called for an animal abusers registry, and so we would support any sort of initiative that would erect an animal abusers registry in Northern Ireland, particularly led by this council in the capital city.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ross Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Councillor. I'm delighted that this motion has been brought before the Council here today. I am, however, disappointed that it hasn't been brought before the Assembly in a number of years, in spite of there being various animal welfare proposals from ourselves. But nonetheless, it's great to see other parties, particularly I have to say the DUP and Sinn Féin, who previously voted against this proposal in the Assembly, actually changing their positions now here on Council.
Remember, take a point.
Will in a minute. If
it's a conscience issue. Members can vote according to their conscience.
Okay.
On ahead.
Of course, the question today is here whether we believe it's right for people to take pleasure in the suffering of any animal. And I'm delighted that some members have the conscience to actually believe that it is wrong. And the evidence shows that the post-mortem evidence refutes all the claims from the hunting lobby. The proves blood sports do inflict suffering on animals. The current Animal Welfare Act exempts hunting with dogs, exempts hunting with dogs from the Act. So it is accepted within the legislation, and I believe within the courts, that it is both cruel and unnecessary. as I say, it would be great to see those two parties supporting this motion here today, and I would very much welcome the leadership of both those parties supporting such a proposal if it was brought before the Assembly. I also think it's important to mention that this issue of hunting with dogs really is the tip of the iceberg, because the reality is that there's so much suffering towards animals in our society. I mean, and we now know that animals have cognitive abilities and intelligence far beyond what we knew before. We've got, for example, the reality now where we can see we can train pigs to play video games. We can also recognise that fish build complex nests, form monogamous relationships, hunt cooperatively with other species, use tools, recognise each other as individuals, and keep track of who is to be trusted and who not, make decisions individually, monitor social prestige, and vie for better positions. They even use Machiavellian strategies of punishment, manipulation, reconciliation, have long-term memories, and are skilled at passing knowledge to one another through social networks. So this is the science. This is what the science says about the intelligence of animals. So we have to ask, is any type of animal suffering and cruelty right in our society? I also have to say that our treatment of animals is reflective of our treatment of each other. We can judge the heart of a man by his treatment of animals. Who is cruel to animals becomes also hard in his dealings with men. We have to recognise when we start showing compassion and conferring rights to other species in our society that it will also show within our treatment and the cruelty that's inflicted from people to other people. And just to finish with, just to say, cruelty is not only the willful causing of suffering, but indifference to it. Cruelty is dependent on having an understanding of cruelty and the ability to choose against it or to choose to ignore it. So it's in all forms of our infliction of cruelty to animals in our society. And as I say, welcome this debate here this evening and this proposal. And I hope this takes us beyond. I hope this is a step in the right direction. We can have many more debates of cruelty against animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Herring.
Thank you, Presiding Councillor. It's just in relation to remarks that Councillor Salford said about the judiciary training relating to animal abuse. Would it be possible for the Council to write a letter to the Minister asking him to reconsider that? And the second point I would ask is, I think the idea of a register for people who are banned from keeping animals by the courts, that there should be some way of policing that, because obviously there isn't any way. You can just, the gavel is put down, the person leaves, and within a matter of hours they could acquire another animal, and it could end up being abused the same way. So I think, again, if Councillor Stalford were to make that a proposal, then I would be happy to second it, and if the Council would then take it up with the Minister of Justice.
I'm happy to make that as an amendment to the motion, and if the member's seconding that amendment, I'm happy to do that.
We need, Councillor Stalford's already seconded the original proposal, so Councillor Herring, are you going to make the amendment, or? Okay. We'll deal with that in a moment. Okay, there's just a few other speakers. Councillor Dudgeon.
Thank you, President Councillor. Councillor Ross Brown spoke about this being the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's important to recognise that we're dealing with a very tiny set of issues here. Hare coursing, stag hunting, fox hunting. I'm not particularly aware of how many people are involved in that in Northern Ireland. But what is vastly more significant is the amount of pig meat that we import from countries like Denmark, where the welfare standards are lower than the United Kingdom. But because the food is cheaper, we eat it, we use it, we enjoy it. Similarly, chicken meat coming from Brazil and Thailand, the welfare standards are quite possibly non-existent as far as I would gather, but nobody is building up a great caucus, a great coalition to stop those imports from third world countries. So I think that we should get real on these issues and recognise that it's vastly more important than a tiny fraction of activity in Northern Ireland. And just while I'm on my feet, I might just ask the council leader from the Alliance Party, is his party in receipt of any funds from various animal organisations like League Against Cruel Sports, British Union Against Vivisection, who are extremely generous in their largesse, especially coming up to election years?
Councillor McAteer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I'd like to begin by commending you for agreeing to use your discretion to have this debate on this motion tonight. I think we've had a very fulsome and inclusive discussion around it. I'd also like to say that I think Councillor Craig was mistaken, if I heard him right, in saying that this isn't exactly relevant to Belfast City, because we have a very extensive urban rural fringe right around the city of Belfast with a free flow of wildlife into it, and we also have a considerable amount of parks in which there's a lot of wildlife. I'd like to move on and just say as well that much of the discussion here has been about people using dogs to hunt foxes or whatever, but my particular experience has been certainly in relation to a little puppy that I had, and I'll not keep people very long, but my son, when he was much younger, a young teenager, was walking this new puppy around a local park when in fact he was set upon, the puppy was, by a number of greyhounds. So, you know, local men were out with greyhounds and they were hunting in one of our local parks. Now, try as I might, I have to say my little puppy was ripped apart quite considerably and did survive, but my son was totally traumatised, as was myself, my family and indeed my neighbours. I did try hard as I might to try and locate the men who had brought the greyhounds into the park, and because I was very angry that actually when they saw my son in the distressed state that he was, they patted him on the shoulder and sent him on. Anyone with a bit of decency would have brought him round home or whatever. So I completely agree with the Councillor Ross when he said that actually I think this type of hunting hardens people towards other people. So I'll just end it there and say I'm really grateful that this was brought up tonight, because I've been trying to seek some resolution to that issue for quite some time about the greyhounds hunting little dogs in local parks and so on. And finally, I would like to say I think wonderful progress has been made in recent years by this council in terms of animal welfare and in terms of hiring the bar and how we as local citizens really relate to the animals, the whole clean-up campaign and so on. I think some fantastic work's been done. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to now hand over to Councillor Long just to sum up, and then I'll hand over to the Chief Executives around the amendments. Okay,
I would just like to thank all of the councillors for their contribution and for their support. And I'd be happy to incorporate whatever the proposals. I'm happy to do that. And indeed, one of the main issues is that why I changed it from DARD to other departments is I recognise that there's a number of departments have got roles within this, including the Minister of Justice, including, in fact, the Department of Environment, or to deal with snares, which is one of the reasons why I did want to change that particular issue. I think, listening to Councillor Brown's comments, I think us councillors need to get worried here that the animals might be taking over this place with the amount of skills that they would have. Apparently there's an election on. I keep being told about that for some strange reason tonight. All I would say is that I've been interested in this particular issue for the last decade, and just because we know what we're doing, maybe others need to think about what they're up to. In terms of particularly Councillor Dudgeon's comment about other countries, well, all I can say is we're trying to do what we can do in this country. We're trying to do what we can do in our doorstep to make things better for animal welfare, and this is one way to do it, and I agree there are many other ways that we can do that, and hopefully we can continue to do that.
Can I make a point
so more than happy to
point of order.
Yeah, what's your point?
I seek clarification from the Chair because the member made a statement about others being behind the time. He should perhaps go and check the record of the Council, or he'll find that the first person to raise an issue about animal welfare in this Council was Sammy Wilson of the DUP in the year 2000. So others have been at this issue a lot longer than him.
I don't think there was any referral at that point around previous members of Council. So, Councillor, if you continue with your...
Let me make it absolutely clear, Councillor. I didn't say anything about any other parties being behind the times or anything else, so I'll be absolutely clear about that. And the reason why I brought this motion was because of the passionate expression of positivity that I actually got at the rally last year, where I heard people from all of the parties pulling together on animal welfare. So that's the reason why I brought this motion today, because I actually want us to be able on occasion to agree, and it looks like tonight we're going to be able to do that, and I'm more than happy to incorporate the comments and all of the issues that were asked for earlier on, so I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Without me reading out the wording of the motion, there was obviously the first slight amendment around the DART Minister and the Executive, and then the second amendment just around the letter to DOJ. Is the notice of motion agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on to the last notice of motion around